Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TheMerode. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Tonight we're hosting a panel discussion, Can we develop psychedelic therapies in Belgium? We're joined by Selah Sue, also known as Selah Sue to many of you, Mathieu Seynaeve, Heidi Peters, and Laetitia van der Rijst. And tonight's topic is really about mental health and how we can develop new, innovative and upcoming forms of treatment to help people struggling with depression and anxiety. So mental health care, well-being all go hand in hand. Mental health treatment is a fundamental part of society. And as we all lived through the COVID pandemic, levels of anxiety and depression rose all throughout the world. And yet, mental health treatment seems to still stagnate. So innovation and research are necessary. And there are people who are up here on stage this evening who are all campaigning, working towards researching on the subject. And we're very lucky to be joined by them. I'll be introducing them in a moment. This research already exists in other European countries, such as France, the Netherlands, Portugal, Switzerland, Germany. And there's a big gap in the research here in Belgium. So that's what this evening is about, so that we can start to close that gap. First of all, thank you to the four of you for joining us this evening and sharing your personal experience and expertise. Thank you, Raphaël Beaumont, who is the initiator of this evening's talk. Our speakers, well, Selah Sue, also known as Selah Sue, is a singer, but she's also a mental health campaigner. And this evening she comes first and foremost as an individual coming to share her experiences with us. And we're very fortunate to have her here on stage with us. Mathieu Seynaeve is a Belgian medical doctor, psychiatrist, and senior research associate at the Psychedelics Trials Group, Institute for Psychiatry, Psychology, and Neuroscience at King's College London. Laetitia van der Rijst holds a Master in Science in Experimental Psychology from the KU Leuven and is currently setting up the first psychedelic trial for alcohol abuse disorder in Belgium. And Heidi Peters, who's all the way on the right-hand side of the stage, has 14 years experience in psychotherapy and has trained in MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. So we have an array of experts who have each their little niche and different experience. I'd like to emphasize that tonight we all come with an open heart, an open mind, so let's all create a safe space for this conversation, as there'll be a Q&A at the very end, so keep in mind any questions you have. This is really a shared and open conversation. This evening is organized in support of the Isala Foundation that Raphaël will be talking to you about at the very end. So without further ado, Laetitia, I leave the floor to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Isabelle, for the introduction, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure for us to be here tonight with all of you to discuss psychedelic-assisted therapy. Next slide, please. So one of the initial reasons we are here tonight to discuss this novel psychiatric treatment is that we are currently living a mental health crisis. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic in the EU, over 1 in 6 people was living with a mental health problem. During the COVID-19 pandemic, these numbers exploded. Here is an example for depression. The green dots indicate numbers before the pandemic, and the blue lines indicate depression rates during the first year of the pandemic. And so, despite the fact that we all hope that the pandemic is behind us, it seems that the increase in mental health disorders associated with the pandemic is not quite behind us. So, one of the main problems when we talk about mental health is that 20 to 60% of patients do not respond to existing mental health treatments, with dire consequences for the patients themselves, their family, but also society at large, including from an economic perspective, as we know that in Belgium, for instance, mental health costs over 5% of the GDP. So the lack of effective treatment calls for the development of novel options, but everywhere around the world, including in Belgium, mental health research is underfunded, which prevents innovation in psychiatry. Against this background, we have seen in the last decades a resurgent interest in psychedelic-assisted therapy with over 120 clinical trials for a wide range of mental health disorders. Now, none of these trials has taken place in Belgium. I will tell you more about the main results of these trials, but first I will give the word to Mathieu, who is going to tell us more about psychedelics.
Thank you, Laetitia. Hi, everyone. So my name is Mathieu Seynaeve. I'm a doctor in London, and these are the studies I worked on. So we started with psilocybin, which is the active ingredient of magic mushrooms, mostly for depression. Then we also did a study with a stronger psychedelic, 5-MeO-DMT. And then we used MDMA for MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder. And so if we think about what psychedelics mean to reveal the mind, to reveal the soul. They are quite a unique kind of group of substances because they give very meaningful experiences with a lot of visuals. And so they change people's perceptions, people's emotions. And you can see there that they can also trigger religious or unity experiences. As you can see on the slide, and these are dose-dependent effects, so bigger doses give more effects, you can see that anxiety is actually pretty low, and that's sort of quite different from what we know about psychedelics or think we know about psychedelics and think about the bad trips and the anxiety that they can give. But when used in a safe setting, they actually don't give that much anxiety. So if we go to the next slide. So there are a group of substances that occur naturally. There's ayahuasca, which is used in the Amazon in Peru. Active ingredient is DMT, which is also used separately in research. And then there's peyote, mescaline, one of the first psychedelics that Albert Huxley started using, which is used in Mexico. Then there's ibogaine, used in African tribes for initiation rituals. And then psilocybin, which are the magic mushrooms, which we currently use the most in research. And there's more than 100 species. They grew all over the world, also in Belgium. You can find them in cow fields, mostly in autumn, so this isn't the bad season for them. And then there's LSD, MDMA, and ketamine, which are the synthetic, psychedelics. So what do they have in common? Well, their molecular structure is very much like serotonin. So they all look like serotonin, as you can see. Why is that relevant? Well, they can be broken down by our bodies very naturally. We have MAO inhibition as antidepressants. We have MAO, which is an important enzyme to break down serotonin. All the psychedelics are physiologically pretty safe. They are psychologically, need to be used in a safe setting to be used safely, but physiologically they're very safe. They are not addictive because they don't stimulate the dopamine system. And Laetitia called me this morning saying that LSD actually triggers dopamine system a little bit. So thank you, Laetitia. So what do? Well, they bind on the serotonin receptor in the brain, and then they sort of increase communication between brain regions. So you can see there on your right-hand side, there's a patient on placebo, and then on the left-hand side, there's a patient on psychedelics, and you can see that the communication between the brain regions is increased. What does that mean? If we go to the next slide. What does that mean? Well, it means that there's increased psychological flexibility, cognitive flexibility, and you can think of it a little bit, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it depends what you do with it. You can see there, people can go to, maybe there's sort of more baby mind, and maybe there's emotional disintegration, there's increased flexibility, there's conceptual disintegration, or they can then later, if used in combination with psychotherapy or in a safe setting, move more towards sort of the wisdom, the maturation, the psychological kind of flexibility can be used productively in combination with psychotherapy, and that makes these interventions in psychiatry quite unique, because usually we only give drugs or we give psychotherapy. This is something that we give in combination. They have been used for a long time all over the world. The first evidence goes back to more than 3000 before Christ, when seeds have been found, peyote seeds have been found in the graves of people. And then we know that the Aztecs used them. They call them the flesh of the gods. They have also been used, as I said, in Africa, but also in Europe, and probably were driven to sort of extinction, or the sort of body of knowledge around it was when the witch hunt happened. And the witch hunt were 10 million women who were burnt on the stables. And there's been a huge kind of eradication of a knowledge system there. If you think about what witches did, they used magic soup, and people would go there if they had mental health difficulties. They would sort of use their knowledge that they had about plant medicine. But the Catholic Church found that very threatening, and the witch hunt was a very active anti-psychedelic kind of process. They were then rediscovered by medicine. This is Albert Hofmann. He was a Swiss chemist who worked for Sandoz, so a pharma company, and he isolated LSD, found it had very interesting psychological characteristics. And this is very much at a time when psychiatry didn't really have many medical kind of interventions. So they had psychotherapy, but as you can see, the first antidepressants were only developed sort of mid-50s, and then the SSRIs that we use now, that Sanna will talk about a little bit later. The SSRIs were developed in the 70s, and in the last 20 years, we actually haven't had much development, pharmacological development in psychiatry. So there's a real lack of development, which is why we're looking back at psychedelics, which have been used previously. And so this is just to say psychedelics were, they weren't really on the market, but they were used as research tools in psychiatry. You can see psilocybin and LSD, Delazide. And this is the first psychiatrist who wrote a paper about it. And he writes in the 1950 that people were disturbed in terms of their barrier of repression, so old memories came back with quite a frightening realism, and they were able to reevaluate some of the meaning of those old experiences that they've had. And that allowed them to get better. You can see that this is very much within a psychoanalytic tradition that this was used at the time. And so the important message here is that 40,000 patients have used psychedelics in clinical research in the 50s and 60s before they became illegal, and that it wasn't a kind of, it wasn't a rebellious thing, or it was just, you know, a very kind of promising new pharmaceutical treatment that psychiatrists were testing. But then it became radical when LSD famously escaped the lab. It was connected to the countercultural revolution, the anti-Vietnam movement, and the kind of American government felt that they were going to lose their grip on society. It was seen as a very dangerous thing, especially when Timothy Leary said that people who would take LSD, they would, as you can see there, turn on, tune in, and drop out. So they would drop out of society, which is seen as a big danger, and Nixon didn't like it. And what happened is that psychedelics ended on the Schedule I drug. And if you click 2 more times, thank you. So what happened is there was a prohibition, and then what happened is that they became illegal, and so the research stopped for about 50 years. But then, as nothing else was developed in the last 20 years, in the early 2000s, people started looking at psychedelics again as a potential treatment option. And so what we do is we go in drug development, we go through phases. The first phase is always about safety. Can it be used safely in healthy volunteers and healthy people? Then we move on to clinical populations, and we see, can this be used safely with people with depression? This is roughly where we are with psilocybin now. We know it can be used safely. We know that the first results are very promising, but only in phase 3 we will know for sure whether the results are also being replicated. Safety is the first thing we think about, both as sort of people who want to use this. We know that the overall harm score, so the score of the harm to people themselves, their environment, and the economy, with psychedelics is very low. You see them at the very top of the graph. You see that alcohol, and this max score is 100. Alcohol is at 72, so 72% of harm. So alcohol is a very harmful drug, whereas psychedelics are much less harmful. They're not addictive because they don't work on the dopamine system, or at least sort of mostly not. And we know that also that when the animal models which are used in addiction, which, for example, very famously, you give a mouse a little bit of cocaine, they keep pressing on the sort of sort of button to get more cocaine. With psychedelics, you don't see that. So the animals don't want more of it, and we see that when people use them naturalistically, they don't use them every day, they don't use high doses every day. So we know that they're not addictive. So if we go to the next slide. And so just to say that they can be used safely, but they need to be used by experienced teams in specialized settings. So when we do research in London, we never give psychedelics for people to take them at home. They're being taken in hospital, and Leticia will talk a little bit more about how we do that. But this is very much a paradigm shift in psychiatry. You know, psychiatrists are not used to giving medication alongside psychotherapists, and that's why this is quite a specialized and sort of niche topic, and we need to learn quite a lot. We need to do quite a lot to be able to learn to work with these new interventions. And I'll hand over to Leticia, who will talk a bit more about the results and the model that we use. Thank you.
Thank you, Mathieu. So the first question is, are they safe? The second question is, do they work? And so clinical trials from the so-called psychedelic renaissance seem to suggest that they do work for a range of conditions. We are talking about treatment-resistant depression. So these are patients that have taken several courses of antidepressants, sometimes years of psychotherapy, but have not responded to any treatment thus far. We are talking about anxiety and depression associated with life-threatening cancer. We are talking about alcohol use disorder. This is the most recently big published paper that found that patients treated with psilocybin-assisted therapy showed significantly higher abstinence rates and significantly less heavy drinking day than patients treated with a placebo. And then we are talking, very importantly, about severe and chronic post-traumatic stress disorder with MDMA-assisted therapy. And you see this is already a phase 3 study. So that's quite far in the drug development process. Currently, there are other studies ongoing for other conditions, such as anorexia nervosa, which is the most fatal psychiatric disorder, and actually also for neurological conditions, such as chronic pain. But so, how does psychedelic-assisted therapy look like? There is a collective fear about psychedelics that they can induce so-called bad trips. What we do know, as Stan Grof puts it, he was a psychiatrist and LSD researcher from the first era, is that psychedelics are non-specific amplifiers of the psyche. So they will amplify anything that's there internally, but also in the environment. And that's why current clinical studies use a very specific protocol to sort of offer safety and support to patients who undergo these intense psychedelic experience. So this protocol unfolds in 3 phases. First, we have the preparation, where the patient and the therapist can meet, build a trusting relationship, and the patient can be prepared for the dosing session. Then you have the actual dosing session. So the drugs are not taken home, and they're also not intended for regular use. Most studies propose 1 to 3 dosing sessions in total. I will say a bit more in a minute. And then you have very important the integration. During the integration, patients can talk with the therapist about the insights, the ideas, the visions, the sensations, the emotions that arose during the psychedelic experience. And the goal is really to see how they can integrate that in their daily life in order to maybe change unhelpful behavioral and emotional patterns. So the actual dosing session, it's not talk therapy. The patient is really encouraged to go inwards and to sit and welcome everything, sit with the experience and welcome anything that might arise. They are invited to lie on a comfortable bed, wearing eye shades and listening to a specifically designed musical playlist. There are usually 2 therapists, one of them that's going with the patient through the entire process, preparation, dosing, integration, and then another therapist, a chaperone. And they are really there to support the patient in case this becomes necessary, but there is minimal interaction. The rooms are also not your standard hospital room, but they are designed to give a calming, warm, cozy feel. As a result of the session, patients often experience feelings of connectedness with the self, others, sometimes the universe, nature, a sense of emotional catharsis, acceptance, and also, importantly, gain new perspective, because one characteristic of psychiatric disorders is that people can get stuck in rigid thought and behavioral patterns, and that's sort of a vicious circle that perpetuates the loop of, the psychiatric disorder. But I'm not going to tell you more about the psychedelic experience, because we have Selah Sue with us tonight, who is going to tell you about her personal experience, and I'm going to give the word over to Heidi Peters, who will introduce her.
Thank you. I would like to introduce you all to the Belgian artist Selah Sue. Welcome. Selah, you were born as Sanne Putses. You studied psychology before gaining international fame. We have known you for years as someone who has been at the forefront of mental health campaign. You have helped in creating honest conversations about difficult feelings such as depression, anxiety, and breaking the stigma around antidepressant medication. While working on your latest album, Persona, during the COVID-19 pandemic, you felt emotionally flattened and blocked. This after taking antidepressants for 14 years. Under the guidance of a Dutch coach, you used psilocybin truffle. As a result, you successfully stopped medication and found new joy and balance in daily life as a mom and artist. After 6 months, the depression returned for no particular reason. We all witnessed the feedback you gave in the media. I find it difficult, Sanne, to express in words how grateful we are that you came today to share your story openly and honestly with all of us here together. Sanne, would you briefly outline when and how depression came into your life?
Yes. Where do I begin? For me, it started to become really difficult when I was a teenager. At 14 years old, I was a really happy child, and then at 14, I suddenly became aware of myself. I developed an eating disorder, social anxiety. I couldn't talk to people anymore. I was scared the whole time, and I endured it until I was like 18, and then it was impossible to get out of bed. My career was starting, but I totally didn't enjoy it because I was totally anxious the whole time. So then I started taking antidepressants when I was 18, and then they really helped me. They really saved my life, I feel. But I took it for 14 years, which is really long, and I tried to quit it I think 3 times, but it never worked out. And I think, what can I say about antidepressants, that it gave me a pretty stable life, but also, because now I know how it is not taking antidepressants, it makes me more tired. I'm a bit more numb. My libido is way, way, way down. I gained a bit weight, but that's okay, I don't care. But still, it also flattens my emotional state of mind, and I could live with that for 14 years because I had a really extreme life in the spotlight, and it felt actually pretty good to be a bit numbed. But at a certain point, I was really tired of it, and it was previous year, and then I felt I was doing a kind of a therapy with my psychologist called voice dialogue, and I couldn't really go really deep in my feelings and emotions, and I was tired of it. So I wanted to try it again to quit my antidepressants, but now with extra help. So I went on the internet and I actually found microdosing with psilocybin. It was a Dutch firm, microdosing institute actually, who had coaches and everything. So I also said it to my doctor, and she said, okay, you're old enough, why not? Try it. If it doesn't work, whatever, do your thing. So I was like, okay. So I did it. I quit really carefully my antidepressants and built up with a microdosing, psilocybin. And it was really good. it felt really, 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 really good. Actually, really good. And then not too good, but just really good. But then my coach, who is in the end just a coach, he's not a doctor, you know, but he said like what could be useful is after a few weeks when you totally quit your antidepressants, you can do a full dose of mushrooms. So I did. And yeah. And it was one of the most intense, important, beautiful experiences of my life. And I want to tell you a bit more about it, maybe, if that's okay. Yeah?
Yeah, you're doing well.
So I did it, now I did like 3 times. 3 times. I always had different experiences. The first time I cried so hard, same energy as I did when I gave birth to my children. It was like a primal, like, everything came out from really deep, and I cried so hard, and it felt that it was finally out, and that I repressed it for so many years, taking antidepressants or previous lives. I don't know what it is, but it felt really good to cry really, really hard. And I remember I felt connected with a God, or call it a mother. I was never religious, but now I have almost, I have to, because there's something bigger. I really felt something bigger that was taking care of me, that was saying like, it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be okay, you're doing okay. And what's really special is that I also felt a lot of sadness. You go through different kind of emotions, a lot of sadness, but it was so big that I had to go through it. I couldn't escape it. And I did that for a lot of years, you know, or I don't know. I couldn't escape it, and it became a form, and I could dance with my sadness. I could dance with it, and I could embrace it. And it also showed me, that trip, that I will never, I can never escape sadness, because it's part of my life. It's part of everybody's life, grief, sadness, unhappiness, part of it. I mean, so you might as well learn to accept it and instead of fighting it. So it was so big that I started breathing really consciously, and it's not something. I remember that when I say in daily life, somebody said, you just have to breathe, and then you think, oh my God, I feel fucking bad, shut up with your breathing. But it felt so natural to start breathing really carefully, that it really showed me that is a way when you feel really sad, is to go to your breathing. It showed all the things you learn from mindfulness, that tells you, like, okay, mindfulness, it showed you because you did it automatically. What else? I also started singing in a language that didn't exist. I became a witch. I felt a witch. I felt connected with my ancestors. And I was really insecure about my art. Like, should I sing even? And that made me clear that is my goal in life. I just need to talk. I just need to sing. That's what I do. So that gave me a lot of confirmation. I did 3 of those amazing experiences, trips, and the months after, the first time especially, were really good, because I could keep it. That not everything, it was not that I was like seeing God then or something, but it felt really clear to me, because I also had my ego was gone during the trip, so I looked in the mirror and I didn't saw a person, I just saw me as a part of everything and everyone. And something I could really grasp in the coming months was that I am the sea, and my fears and thoughts are the waves, and they will pass. It's something that it's all in my head, you know, my fears. And whenever I got scared, like in the months after, I'm like, okay, this is my brain tricking me. So I could place it and I could move on. So it was really good. But I didn't had anybody to really talk about it, because in Belgium, yeah, my fellow artists, of course they love it, because I'm in an artist environment, but it's not that my mother felt weird about it. Like, my shrink felt weird. She didn't know anything about it, my therapist. But unfortunately, like 6 months after, it all went down really extremely again. And like, I don't know if you're all from Belgium, I don't know what public is here actually, but I put a picture on Facebook on my hardest moments, and it was that hard. It was even harder than you see. It was like horror in hell. So I went back to depression. And I couldn't get out of it. And I couldn't keep on that insights what I had because there was nobody I could do it with. So I was obliged to go back to my shrink, to my psychiatrist. And I really wanted to integrate also that experience, but it was not an option because he didn't know anything about it. They just don't know anything about it. And it was even a bit like, you're still on those mushrooms? Because he read it like on internet, so he was a bit even like having his judgment about it. So I was like, no, I stopped. A bit like ashamed because in their eyes, I mean, in general in Belgium, it's still like, what he said was like, you have a brain disease. And I don't say it's not true, because I'm like, I don't know, guys, I don't know. But he said like, you have a brain disease and you have to take antidepressants for the rest of your life, because otherwise, life will get really hard always. And that's difficult because I felt with the psychedelics that there was an other way also. And I couldn't explore it because there wasn't anybody in Belgium that would guide me through it. But now I can do antidepressants next to psychedelics. Antidepressants helps. They help me. I'm on it again. I mean, and I can be a mother again, you know, I can be back. But it also numbs you and it doesn't really solve the root of your problem. While the feeling that I had on psychedelics was that it shows you your roots of the problems and you have no other way than to go through it and to work with it. But then of course you need to have the guidance after to work with it, and that's something I didn't have. So that's a bit where I'm at now. That's why I'm sitting here, because I feel a bit failed, not ashamed, otherwise I wouldn't put it on Facebook that I'm back on antidepressants. But I feel that it's it shouldn't be my final thing to be for the rest of my life on a high dosage of antidepressants, if there are other possibilities. Yeah.
When there would be a clinic where you could go in the future, where you know that there are professionals to help you to prepare and also have the experience and do the integration, would you do it?
I would 100% do it, because it's also, I mean, it's not addictive, and it's also not damaging if you do it in the right setting. So why not? I mean, why not try it out? So yeah, that's something that I really missed. I only had like the hippies that loved my roads, not the doctors here. And I think it's a missed chance in Belgium.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Selah. Yeah, thank you. So we're going to transition a little bit into more of a Q&A, and then Raphael is going to talk to us a little bit more about what the aims are with the foundation, which, as you can guess, we want to start psychedelic research in Belgium. But so, yeah, really wanting to open up the floor. If anyone has any questions, maybe raise your hand, and then we'll pass a mic on. Yeah, just any of us, any questions that you have, please let us know.
Hi. Hello. Thank you for all the lecture. It was really great. I was wondering if you're familiar with the use of music, as I saw it was mentioned, but particularly ambient music, hand in hand with psychedelic therapy. And if you're familiar with John Hopkins, not the university, but the the artist, ambient artist. He's really great. He actually released an album called Music for Psychedelic Therapy.
I tripped on it.
Oh, well, I
Yeah.
did too.
Yeah.
I did too 3 weeks ago in Switzerland, so it was great. Yeah, beautiful album, and he's really focusing. He's an amazing artist outside of that, but he's really focusing on this, the ambient music and the use of psychedelics hand in hand with ambient music. And I was wondering if it's something you've been checking on or anything. Is it something that you're planning to look at? Yeah, thank you.
I'm not the expert here, but I just can talk about own experience. And I felt like that's also a question. What I do have, I think, I was so sensitive to the music, and sometimes I was like, "Ooh, this is so not," that I thought about before. I'm gonna put this on and this, but it was totally not. I was really classical music that I heard, like Mother God through the classical music, and my trip after was John Hopkins records. Is it important to use the right, because I feel like it can guide you, or is any music will help you in the end, or is it really a particular kind of tones or notes you have to hear or something to have a good trip?
Yeah, so at King's we use a playlist which is used also in John Hopkins but university, and there's actually also John Hopkins in that list. But so yeah, music is a really important part of the therapy to guide people through it. Initially, we try to give people a safe feeling by using music which is quite soothing, and but then the idea is to kind of that the music takes you on a journey also towards parts of yourself that you find more difficult, so that not all the music needs to be soothing or beautiful. Maybe there's also some ugliness in there, and maybe that will bring you to personal experiences that were more difficult. And the idea on psychotherapy is very much to move through difficult experiences and to kind of, the therapist, and I'm a therapist on some of the trials, you're kind of encouraging people to kind of use their curiosity but also their bravery to go into some of the difficult things that maybe come up from their past, or and that they find something at the other side of that. So it's not about necessarily controlling symptoms, but it's really about helping people to go on that very personal inner journey that is different for everyone.
Yeah. And would you adapt the music to the person, if it's too heavy, or?
Yeah, I think if people, of course, really don't like classical music, we're not going to kind of guide them through a whole. So yeah, we do ask a little bit, and there's of course also cultural components. Some people might like certain music, and it might have all sorts of connotations. So yeah, we do kind of try to meet people where the music feels kind of good to them.
Yeah, and at the University of Geneva, for instance, they are trying now studies where they invite the patients to compose their own playlist, but according to some criteria. So they're like, they have a Spotify account, and they're like, pick a playlist of soothing music and pick a playlist of more intense music, and they are starting to compare, if this is more effective and more pleasant or more, beneficial for the patients than when it's a standardized playlist.
And yeah, that's something that I find really interesting is, do you also, when you do like aftercare, I mean, I had it when I put on the music again, when I'm sober, when I didn't take anything, that it will come back a bit, the fear or the thoughts, so that you can use it even after again, that certain songs to regain that experience or something. I think.
Yes, you can. It helps with the integration. So, and this is what actually a professional helps you to do, to remind about the music and how you can use it. Yeah. Mm.
It's powerful.
Yes.
Yeah,
hi. I have another question, same spot, same area. I'm kind of curious. It's not especially a question towards you guys. Thanks for being here, but it's so becoming mainstream. I'm curious about the audience. Who did a psychedelic trip to understand yourself? I did my first in 2013. So I just want to show your hands. Yeah, thanks. So thanks for being here. But actually, we are all in this kind of adventure, and I like to see that, because let's talk to each other. What we are doing here, we have answer to this mysterious that is life. So thanks for being brave and raise your hands. Thanks. Thank you, guys.
I'm going to just say something on that note, if you don't mind. In King's, we started with an integration circle. So the problem we had is that people were part of this research, and often they were people with treatment-resistant depression, so they've been trying lots of different things. And they don't always come from a community where psychedelics are mainstream. They, of course, can read something online, they can watch documentaries, but they don't always feel understood. And as Sanne said, that's a crucial component of the therapy, is that people afterwards can talk to other people about it. And if you go to the Amazon, where ayahuasca is part of a sort of a religious system, they use it as a tool for healing. They will always have sharing circles the following day. So the following day, people will talk about what they've been through as part of their ayahuasca experiences. And it's that community that we know now is really important for people to feel understood, and actually for the effects to be probably more sustained over time as well, because you can learn from each other. And if you look at cultures that use psychedelics as part of their culture, similarly to if you think about the witch hunt, the psychedelics are never kept by just everyone. You go to often an older, wiser person to take the psychedelics, and so they then kind of protect you from, as we said, the flexibility, the openness can be harmful if not used in a therapeutic way, if you're not protected. A little bit like a parent would protect a child. You would say, go and play, but don't go to the places that are dangerous. And if you do, then I'll sort of hold you. And it's that sort of therapeutic containment, holding environment that we're trying to create. And that's why you can't just give psychedelics to people when psychiatrists, when this becomes legal in Belgium, and it looks like it will become an available treatment at some point. We will need to know how to use this. Or psychiatrists, as Sanne said, our psychiatrists will need to know how to use this, or therapists will need to know how to use this. And that's why we're so passionate about bringing this to the clinic also, where the patients are that need it the most, and not everyone can use this at home, because for some people it's just too unsafe.
Hi, I also have a question for Sanne. Thank you for sharing your experience with so much authenticity. I have a question more regarding your art. How did your art compare through the different stages of your life of depression? So when you were on antidepressants, when you were on nothing, and on the first few months after taking psilocybin?
Yeah, well, good question, yeah. That was the exact reason why I also wanted to stop my antidepressants, because I felt it blocked me creatively. But I also wrote all my records taking antidepressants. So it's also not that black and white. It's not that I was like a zombie taking it, because I was 14 years doing it. But I felt when I didn't take them that I was way more open creatively, and I dared more, and I had more confidence even, actually. I could, it's like creativity is difficult to, you have to be open, you have to have an open mind to make things, and it was like, I was already open, but it was like way more open or something. It was really nice. Yeah, I miss it. Damn. And now I'm back on it. So, but I'm gonna be honest. If I have to make the decision of being a bit less creative but not depressed, or being really creative but really depressed, I would go for the first option. It's really not worth it. I really don't care that my songs are a bit less deep, as long as I feel that I want to live, So, yeah.
And what about the time when you used psilocybin? Did that enhance your openness? in
Actually,
art and
yeah, it did. Now, you know, that's never scientifically proven. The microdosing is never scientifically proven, I think, yeah? But I felt it could also then be maybe that because I got a lot of confirmation that got stars for my record, that my confidence was up and past COVID. So it's all combinations maybe that I felt so good, but I'm really sensitive to what I'm feeling. I always have like a big light on how do I feel today. It's really tiring, but I do have it since I was 14. And I felt that it really gave me the microdosing a drive to go deep, to really be creative. So yeah, I felt it did really good things. But it also made things a bit stronger. So whenever I felt down, I felt a bit more down. But that's not bad, because then you have to work on it instead of walking away from it. So I had good experiences taking microdosing, but unfortunately it was not enough to take me out of a depression. Yeah.
I have a question regarding more your point of view you have as therapist, and then a question about Belgium. I have been watching, maybe like many of you, Netflix recently on psychedelic. I mean, it's amazing what they did. And watching Robin, I'm not sure about Qatar Aris, his name, but when you see what he does with patients under depression, there is a lot focused on finding the cause of their depression. Whereas for those of us who have experienced psychedelic, you find the cause, but not from the logical perspective, but you dissolve the problem in a way. So I'm a bit questioning the usual therapeutic approach of finding a cause and a solution and putting some goriki music during the trip, which obviously leads to some perception of the problem. So I'm questioning this from your therapeutic perspective. And the second question is, what is the problem in Belgium? What prevents the advancement of therapeutic, psychedelic assisted therapy? Is it the government? Is it our understanding? So what are the obstacles? Thank you.
I think the obstacle is indeed the government and being afraid of it. No?
I think in Belgium the problem mainly is that professors who are normally setting up studies, academic studies, have an interest, surely, but not the interest to start. And that's why we have to start from the bottom up. So master students have to decide to do their PhD on it and find the money somehow. And this is actually what I'm doing, and what Sisse, who is a psychiatrist who is here today, is also doing in Ghent. And if you'd like to know more, we can explain. But literally, my experience was approaching the head of psychiatry at the Brugman University Hospital, tell him about it, ask him why it's not being done, him telling me, cool, find the money, and me writing a grant proposal and getting it. But now we have to enter the process, which is very difficult because we have to get approval from the Drug Administration, Federal Administration for Medicine and Health Products. But I know that there is one study with psilocybin about to start in the University of Liège, and that they got conditional approval. It's a very different indication. It's actually for patients in a vegetative state, post-coma. So it's not really a psychiatric disorder, but more a neurological one. And so it seems that it's slowly starting. Maybe you can say, because normally also studies are not only started from university, but also from pharma company. And I'm less aware of why this hasn't been done in Belgium yet.
Yeah, I think the problem is you need to start, right? And to start, you need to overcome a lot of obstacles. So it's, as Letizia said, it's both goodwill and will from the academic establishment, also the government. You know, the government hasn't funded any studies, whereas in the Netherlands, for example, the Minister of Health has said that he believes this is a really great opportunity. The Netherlands are taking a real kind of pioneering role, and they're developing psychedelic centers at their different universities. UK has done the same, US has done the same. I mean, France, for a long time, we thought was going to be the last country to start in Europe, but they've started. So now I think it's maybe Italy and Belgium, but we really need to start, because the problem is, and I've seen that in the UK, it's true having these treatments in our academic centers, in our academic hospitals, that people start to know how to use them. Your teams need to learn, right? But then there's also, once some patients have gone through it, they talk about their experiences. And there's been the documentary on sort of national television, but it's about the UK, so it's quite different. Once you see documentary about people who speak your language, who are from your culture, that's really when, and I think we wouldn't be here if we don't think there can be sort of a bottom-up approach, which I really think we shouldn't wait for the government. And as Raphael will explain in a little bit, actually internationally, lots of the funding came from philanthropic funders who often had a family member who used psilocybin or another psychedelic in a positive way, and they just gave money to kind of start the research, which is a very effective way, because academic research is slowed down by the lack of money.
Hi, I think more a question for the scientists among you. I've seen in the list that there was also ketamine in the list, and I was wondering about psychedelic treatments for example, polyneuropathy, pain, or these type of situations.
Yeah, that's being looked into. So for chronic pain, complex pain, some of the more psychosomatic indications, there's ongoing research in neurology as well. We've done one study on complex headaches. So yeah, that's, maybe we can talk about it at the bar, but that's happening.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, I also have a question. You mentioned that after your experience you had to go to therapy again, like it's a bad thing. But for me, how I view it is more like an accelerator, the experience of psychedelics, in order to get therapy better. But it's not per se a bad thing. I just wanted to shift the point of view, and I guess what I'm trying to highlight here is what I have observed among my peers, that is called generally spiritual bypass. So it's about, you have this state of ecstasy, and you want to get it back, and you love it, but you get stuck in it. You don't want to go, what is called exploring your shadow or getting treated for your depression, because you're stuck in the magnificence of this experience. And I just wanted your point of view on the adverse effect that this can have, the pervert effect, almost. Thanks. Anyone ready?
That's a really good question. How we use psychedelics currently is how they are being used to develop it as a new intervention in psychiatry, right, as a sort of treatment. So we try to prove to the government and to the regulators that these can be used medically, that they can have medical effects. Once you prove that, the government is actually obliged to reschedule it, and then it becomes available for more researchers in a sort of a cheaper way, essentially. But if you look at how in the real world psychedelics are used, and then you need to go to other cultures who use them, they would indeed often use them alongside. So they would use them every year or maybe every season. They would have a ceremony with the whole village together, and then they would have ongoing integration. So they would talk to maybe the shaman about it. And so we don't see these treatments as a magic cure that you can take once and then you're healed for life. We see them as a potential catalyst of a psychotherapeutic process of maturation where you can discover yourself. And I think I'm going to quickly go back to your previous question about the therapeutic assumptions. And I think what we learn is that human beings are very complex, psychologically kind of very complex, with lots of different parts to our personality. And it's more about getting to know ourselves better. When I work as a as a psychiatrist in psychedelic research, I'm not the expert. I'm more a little bit like a midwife, you know, who has knowledge about how a baby is born, but I don't interfere when it's happening naturally. You know, maybe I'm going to do something when people are very anxious, but you're humble towards people's kind of ability to find the answer themselves. And it's a little bit like, this is a metaphor from a book, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, who's a trauma psychiatrist. And he says, the surgeon doesn't heal the wound. The surgeon just stitches the wound so that the wound can heal by itself. It's the body that heals the wound. And maybe psychologically we can heal as well when there's the right circumstances. And the right circumstances might be maybe a psychedelic substance to kind of do that self-exploration, rather than maybe an antidepressant, and they can be used alongside each other. But an antidepressant will often blunt and take away the symptoms, so there's a focus on the symptom rather than on maybe the kind of what maintains the symptoms, the underlying process. I'm mindful, I'm really keen for maybe Raphael to... One more question? Okay, one more question.
Super interesting. First thing that comes to mind is the definition of agency as the capacity to affect change and be accepted for it. And it sounds very much to me like this is kind of, you know, taking agency over your own therapy and like away from psychopharmaca. But my question is, do you know if there have been studies into the demographics and the anthropology of psychedelic users? Because I wonder whether this might have an effect on its acceptance. Because if I think about people in my very, very large network who are experimenting with psychedelics, it's like everybody has at least one degree, are all like alpha people. It's not like it's not brown people that are super stigmatized and like hard drugs. And do you know anything about this?
Yeah, I think this question has several layers, and Mathieu will probably answer some layers, but I think you raise a very good point that we're trying to improve psychiatry and psychiatric treatments, but the system around which this is offered also needs to change, and that's a big question we have with the study we're setting up, is that it's a vulnerable population and you can give them the best therapy possible with psychedelics, but if they go back to a system that's sort of, you know, encouraging the psychopathology, it's very hard. And Rosalind Watts, who did a lot of, she was actually the clinician, the psychotherapist on one of the main depression study of Robin Carhart Harris, and she really now went into saying, what I understand is that psychedelics are something, but they cannot change everything, and you really need to change the system and to provide this sort of community for people who take psychedelics. And that's why these integration circles are so important, because yeah, like you say, it's only a very specific population who can maybe benefit just from a little bit of psychedelic-assisted therapy, but we need a wider, more systemic change to include everyone, basically. But that's only part of it.
That's really a fact. Like I mean, what you can do now is like you can go to Holland and do like a 2-day retreat or something, and then it's like 1,300 euros or something, which is like really for the privileged people that have money, that have time, while everybody needs it in the end. So that I think is also then important that in Belgium, if it's broader, that it's available for everybody, that you don't need to pay so much money for it.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for your attention, and thank you very much for your testimony, Sana. The reason why we're here is because we set up the Isal Avendist Foundation. It's on the next slide. And my name is Raphael. I help impact initiatives to fundraise and strategize. And we set up the Isala van Dis Foundation in honor of Isala van Dis, who was the first female doctor in Belgium, and in the idea of breaking frontiers and opening new barriers. So as we already covered in the last question, most countries have started the clinical research. At the forefront you have the Anglo-Saxon countries, US, UK, but actually, as we mentioned earlier as well, even France has already started the research. And when there's no funding for research in Belgium, what does it entail? What does it mean? It means that we don't have an expertise being built. It means that we don't have the treatment centers that could be available to anyone, not just the privileged. There's also no investment by pharma to develop clinically available psilocybin. And most and foremost, I mean, is the therapy. I mean, we're not training therapists because, as we mentioned, it's part of a holistic system. It's not only the substance, but it's the whole therapy being guided with psychedelics and therapy. So, as we mentioned also earlier, most of the funding in the other countries, the UK or US, was philanthropic. And we expect that it will also be the same case in Belgium. To be philanthropic here as well, to allow governments to follow suit and also do the match funding afterwards. As the question notices, I think there's already a mainstream attention to psychedelics, and we're living through the psychedelic renaissance. And so there's an active demand from the community to have other therapies available. And so the aims of the foundation are pretty simple, is to fundraise, to be able to fund research in Belgium on both sides of the linguistic borders, to train the therapists and create an ecosystem in Belgium where we can link the therapists together in Belgium, but also in international collaboration. The foundation is existing, is being hosted by the King Baudouin Foundation and managed under its supervision. And the next slide will show the current pipeline of projects that we have. One with Laetitia, and the other one with Cisse, who's just on this side of the side. So if you want to have questions, discuss with them afterwards, please feel free. I don't know, yeah, I think we're finished. I will give you the... Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Raphael. As Raphael has just highlighted the importance of how we're going to be able to take this one step further forward, I'd like to leave the closing remarks to the four of you. I don't know if Sana or Mathieu or Laetitia or Heidi, you'd like to have one last word that you leave in mind for everybody, and then we will follow the conversation in a more casual way around the bar. If you have any more questions, you can come and ask us in person, and you can also email us, and we will give you the information necessary. But from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. It's very important research, fundamental to everybody's well-being, and thank you for being so open and sharing this personal experience and expertise with us.
Final words. I think there's a lot to say about this, and I think it's important work. I want to thank Sanne for being at the forefront of destigmatizing mental health, and in Belgium I think we need to think about these things more. We also need to invest into them more. We can make and develop better treatments, so it's not that it's not possible, it's not a problem that can't be solved, but we just need more will and sort of people getting involved. And I think, you know, having worked in this area for a couple of years, it's really exciting as a psychiatrist. You know, I trained in Leuven in Belgium, then went to Ghent for a little bit, and I was just disillusioned with what we could do for patients. It just felt really, when you're kind of coming from surgery, you go to psychiatry, it feels like you're entering the Middle Ages. Like, it's just... there really isn't much, you know, and there is good psychotherapy, but often it's expensive. It's hard to kind of find the right therapist also. And I think this is an exciting area because people kind of find hope in this. And when you see, as Sana said, when people go into these experiences, they find something in themselves that they can hold on to, something meaningful. And I think it's really valuable to try to bring that into psychiatry, because we need hope and we need more effective treatments. So thank you everyone for being here tonight.
Thank you very, very much. I hope to see you all very soon.
Okay, yeah, I will say something small.
Okay.
Otherwise I feel rude. So yeah, totally agreed. I think what I felt when I did my post on Facebook is that, whoa, how many people are on the same boat, how many people are having difficult times, how many people are taking antidepressants. I mean, yeah, because we have no other option, because that's our only way to go or something. And I think it's really important, because now I feel like it's the way, even though if you want to get help, the waiting lists are extreme. Everybody that wants to get help is on a waiting list. It costs so much money to talk to somebody. So I think we need more people on the ground to help us, clearly, because it's not enough. It's not enough. It's 1 at 6 has mental problems, and how many psychologists do we have here? We need to have like more psychologists that know more, explore more options to help us go through this super difficult life. So yeah, that's why I'm all into this.
Yeah, this subject. This subject touches a sensitive chord for all of us, and so with these shared experiences and the importance of community, and we've spoken about different cultures and the communal ongoing discussions that continue and the support. It's also what we're doing fundamentally in society, in smaller groups and then larger groups, so we can each play our own role. Thank you for your presence this evening. I hope to see you all very soon. I will now all ask another last warm round of applause and meet you around in the rest of the club.